All right. So for people that don't know you, who are you?
Which is probably a lot of people.
Which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we've known each other. When did you move to Ramot?
Well, I moved to Israel in 2012.
Oh, you're right.
So spent a little bit of time in America. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Right.
But from 2012, I moved to Ramot 3 years after we moved to Israel. So 2015.
Oh, so you were already 2012. Where were you in 2012? In you were living in Qatar.
So we moved straight to Bayit Vegan.
Right. Jerusalem. It's all Jerusalem.
All Jerusalem. Yeah. We started in Jerusalem, which was surprising to my wife and I. I'm from Philadelphia, right. Raised there till I was 15, and which is like most of your adolescence, growing up into that. And then you hit in about 10th grade. That's when we moved.
You're from Philly?
I'm from Philly. My wife's from Ohio.
Wow. I thought you were in New York all the way.
No, I picked that up, from 16 to 20. Right. That was when I was in the New York area.
Right.
But my wife is from Ohio. I'm from Philly. For those, who don't know what that means not big cities. So
Philadelphia is a pretty big city.
Well, suburb.
Right.
Bala Cynwyd, Lower Merion.
Right. Did you go to the city a lot or not really?
Not really.
Right.
Not that much.
Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, been there.
Me too.
But it's a funny thing. Yeah, when you live there, I think a lot of people probably went to the city on class trips and stuff like that. The Liberty Bell is there.
Yeah, I went there and visited.
Yeah. I don't know that I ever was.
No, you don't usually.
When you're there,
No, of course.
It's a tourist thing. So we were kind of surprised that we moved to Jerusalem. Yerushalayim was not necessary. I mean, it's on a lot of people's, wish list of a place to live in theory. And if you're connected to that spiritual tradition, but we probably thought we would live somewhere quieter, Which is why Remote is great, because it's a little outside.
It's like, why did you choose Jerusalem with that in mind?
Right before we came to Israel, my wife and I spent about a week and change. I was teaching high school before, and a lot of my students, both boys and girls, 2 different schools I was teaching in, spent gap years in Israel, and I went to go visit them with the undercover assumption that we were probably going to move that summer. And we came and I visited a bunch of different schools. There's probably 50 to 60 schools throughout not just in Jerusalem, throughout Israel, where people come to spend a year studying in depth before they go to college. And just kind of put my name out there, here visiting students, but might be here next year. If you have anything, let me know. And I got offers from the places I didn't visit. Oh, we heard you were there. That's always the way it is. You put your,
That's so funny.
Yeah, you put all of your effort into one area, and then
Crazy.
It just comes out of left field. All my jobs have been like that. All of my, everything. Pretty much anything I've ever done professionally has all been kind of just like
basically not what you're looking for or the place you're not looking for it.
Yeah. Wow. I don't think I've ever handed in a resume.
Wow.
Because of that, because it always just comes out of nowhere. My first job, I was still, I was in graduate school and I was studying to become a rabbi. And there was this opportunity to go learn on campus in a school. And I missed the whole presentation and, process. And I came over afterwards, I missed the whole thing. I was busy helping one of my teachers with something. And the person who came to interview people for this position in like a studying role, not really a teaching role, we ended up speaking for like an hour. And he's like, why don't you come give a model lesson? We'd actually love. And I was like, so I ended up speaking to a bunch of people who I asked for advice and friends and a lot of soul searching, and decided to actually abandon finishing graduate school. Ended up getting rabbinic ordination, a different channel, because I just started teaching, and it's been wonderful. And really every job that I've had has kind of been that kind of story. And
that happened here then you're running around Israel?
Running around Israel, teaching. I was teaching high school.
This is what, 2011?
This is 2011, around November time. I think we came Thanksgiving.
I don't know when that is. I'm from England.
I know. I'm saying that's like a point of contention.
Right.
We don't have that, by the way.
Why? Is that something to do with the British? It's terrible that I don't know.
Well, Thanksgiving is when America,
beat the Brits.
No.
Oh.
It's when America was discovered and with the Indians, and it's a whole, nowadays is the whole rewriting.
That was the Puritans. That was 16 something.
There's a whole rewriting, what actually happened. Founding of America. It's a messy subject right now.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because isn't it what it always was?
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, like everything now, things are trying to be rewritten to make it work.
Well, people are trying to figure out what's going on. I think it'll end up in a good place.
Okay.
I know it will. Everything will.
Right.
But yeah, things go through these death and rebirth kind of scenarios where there's whether it's psychological or jobs people have, whatever area of life, all of a sudden you find that there's this crack in the foundation of it, and a lot of times something new grows, like a flower will grow out of that. So I hope that's what will happen,
right,
in America and really
in the world.
The world right now is
definitely.
Anyway, so we're in Jerusalem. I ended up getting an offer to teach either in Beit Shemesh, which is about 30 minutes out from Jerusalem, or to teach in Jerusalem. And we decided that people probably wouldn't visit us in Beit Shemesh if we lived there. And, we were making quite a leap. Never had any family, don't really have any family in Israel. My wife doesn't either. She has some cousins, but, no immediate family. So it was important to be in a place where
you knew people.
And where people would go,
Right.
Beit Shemesh is a popular place to live, but tourists, if you have friends who are coming in, they're probably going to stay in a hotel in Jerusalem. There's not really hotels in Beit Shemesh, and unless you have family there, you're probably not going to go there. Anyway, that's how we ended up here.
Right.
And I taught in a school there. Then out of the blue, got called. I was teaching part-time there because that's what you got to do when you move to a new country. You find a place to get in and
start
and hope that you're good enough that you'll attract some attention. And that's what happened. So a school in the old city of Jerusalem, which is, what if you would have told me that I'd be teaching in the old city in Jerusalem, right 2-minute walk from the Temple Mount, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But I got this call from now a colleague and a dear friend inviting me to come give a model lesson, also to try it out.
That was Rabbi David Aaron.
That was Rabbi David Silverstein, who
yeah.
is very intimately involved in the hiring of Rabbi David Aaron's yeshiva.
Amazing.
Amazing faculty, amazing staff.
Yeah, just amazing. The whole thing.
The whole thing. Is, what a treat to be able to teach in that space, but also those people. And
I'm quite surprised to hear, because I know you so well, I'm quite surprised to hear that you say, I'd never have thought I would have ended up teaching the old city, whereas
never. I
thought, well, that's exactly where, knowing you would think you would want to be. But you're saying you weren't aiming for that.
I would have thought.
And yet it found you.
Yeah, I would have thought, well, I'll give you an example. I myself, when I was 18, I also studied in Israel for 1.5 years. And I did not study in Jerusalem. I specifically decided to go further out so that I wouldn't, quiet, focused. I'm kind of like that.
Where were you in?
I was in Beit Shemesh, actually.
That's right. In, what's that?
Rashid.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Also an amazing place. But I needed that quiet and wasn't really looking for an adventure as much as a place to sit and think and work things out. Kind of figure out questions that had been tugging at me and trying to figure out what 18, what an amazing, leave your home, leave your family.
And you had questions even then?
I don't know that I had. Yeah, well, of course I had questions. Yeah, sure. I don't know that they were.
You say, of course, because not all 18-year-olds do.
Well, you do. So even with me, I didn't have questions from a place of disappointment. I just had I was just living till I was 18. And you're about to kind of start for real. And yeah, of course you have questions. It's like, even the question of like, do I go that way or that way?
Oh, I see.
Until you've thought it out and you really had, which is why it's such a amazing opportunity. Right before you enter college, I kind of thought I knew what I wanted to study. I know I like people. I thought I might go into psychology, or that's what I started majoring in. Tell you about that later, maybe.
Right.
Switched out of that. But I had a kind of like feel for what I liked, but to be able to kind of work through who I was and what I wanted. What a blessing to be able to do that.
At 18 in Israel. Your family, how religious, although that's a horrible way to describe people and a family. No, don't use the R word. It's not the right. So what were they like? Let's just say it like that. What was it like Jewishly growing up? For me, it was like traditional and respect and Judaism. We are Jewish, but it wasn't keep the mitzvah. It wasn't that. I was secular, if you want to call it that. But what were you? Because I don't have, being that I'm from that background, I really don't have much of an idea of a modern Orthodox type upbringing. It like many religious people don't know what a Baal Tshuva, which is, for those who don't understand, Baal Tshuva means people who have come back to religion later on in life or at some point in their life. Not come back to it, actually become religious.
Sure.
So I'm like, I didn't really have any idea what a modern Orthodox or a religious home is. But I've become religious. I see a lot of these people grew up calling themselves modern Orthodox, and then they changed when they became big boys and big girls.
Yeah.
Either more modern or
Sure.
more religious,
Sure.
for want of a better word.
Yeah.
So where do you fit in all of that?
I don't ever remember my parents, which I'm so grateful for. I don't ever remember my parents saying, we're modern Orthodox. That's like the box that we fit into. I also grew up in a town that, I don't know that there is modern Orthodox. I grew up the son of Dr. and Mrs. Jerry and Fran Weinberg, and that's what I knew. And of course I had friends.
But there was Shabbat in your house.
There was Shabbat in my house, yeah.
And your dad went to Beit Knesset. He went to shul.
Sure. So I guess to go straight into that, because to speak to something like what modern Orthodox is.
It's a big subject.
Yeah. We grew up keeping Torah and mitzvos. I remember a marked shift in my father's study and interest in study when I was probably in 8th grade or so.
How old is that?
That is 13, 14. Mm-hmm. And I can clearly remember, it could be that, memory is becoming sharper at that age also. It's like a coming of age for sure. That's when, but I definitely have a clearer memory of my father being with books more. He's quite a smart man, but specifically with Jewish books. And actually, it's an interesting story. My father had it himself. He went to BTA, which is kind of like a Jewish high school. He definitely had a Jewish studies curriculum, dual studies curriculum. And, it was usually like old European rabbis who couldn't really relate to these young Americans. My father was born in America.
Right.
His parents came to America before the war from Germany. And my mother's parents also, or her father came from Poland at a really young age, and her mother was born here, was born in America.
To all miss the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Like my family.
It's a whole thing.
My family too.
How do you feel about that?
I don't know. I feel, well, obviously you feel lucky, but also I feel strange, because it's like, how did we, I wouldn't say it's like survivor's guilt. It's not. It's nowhere near. But it's like, wow, dodge that bullet.
Yeah.
But yet I see all these families with all these grandparents and great-grandparents and all these stories.
Sure.
And I'm an outsider to all those stories.
Yeah.
So I just observe it. But a lot of our contemporaries, they lived a childhood growing up with survivors. I don't know what that would be like.
Yeah, I feel like I totally missed that.
Yeah.
There's a sense, I don't know if it's guilt, but there's a sense of being an outsider, which is a funny thing because it's not something you want to be part of.
No, it's very ironic. Yeah, you're right.
But you do feel like you missed something.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you wanted to hit it, but that, there's a certain, and you live in it also,
Mm-hmm.
It could have been. Dodging a bullet is also a traumatic event,
Right.
And it wasn't on purpose, I don't think. I don't think my family came to America. I think they came like before.
Mine too.
Shortly before.
Right.
Anyway, so he went to
PTA.
a modern Orthodox, probably, school, which meant that the boys were growing up in America, and probably were more interested in baseball and other sports than learning. And they had these old European rabbis who did not know what to do with these boys. So that's how he grew up. My parents married, kept Shabbos, kosher, holidays. But really, when I was in 8th grade, I don't know the exact timeline of when this happened. My father found himself in a Beit Knesset, in a shul, at some point, and at least the legend goes that he found a book on the shelf, pulled it out, and opened it up. And now I know that book is a book called B'nai Yissaschar. That book is, it goes through the Jewish calendar, and kind of speaks about what's the character of a particular Jewish month. And my father was like, they never taught me this in high school. What is this? Wow. Like, all I remember is studying Talmud, and so accidentally my father, he could read Hebrew, so he read through a little bit of the book and was like, and he stumbled on some other stream within Judaism, and in a short time he sought out a few teachers locally. Rabbi Shalom Kamenetsky was one of his early teachers in the Philadelphia yeshiva, and they learned B'nai Yissaschar together, that book that he had found, and Nefesh Chaim. And through that, my father all of a sudden became enamored again with all of it.
Wow.
Meaning it was like he snuck in through a back door, and
standing by a bookshelf.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he was constantly walking around with a Talmud, or not in a in a really healthy way.
Right, reinvigorated.
Yeah, totally.
Had he ever been passionate about?
Never.
So really, it was things that his mind was loaded up with, and on the desktop.
Yeah.
But this was like the launch.
Sure.
Of your dad's real Jewish life.
Yeah, I'd say that happens probably to a lot of people who spend a year in Israel, like in the yeshiva that I teach in, that you kind of loaded up with all this software, but you never bothered to open it because it's not relevant.
Right.
And then you have this experiential type of thing, and you're like,
you access all these files now, or you access all these,
or you don't,
apps.
or not, or you decide I mean, that's a really healthy thing also about our yeshiva is, it's not a naknikiyot factory. You're not making sausages one at a time. They all look the same. It's a real journey to yourself, and
it's the best way.
Oh, it's great. And it's for me also. Every year I get to kind of reimagine myself through their questions and through their
amazing.
Yeah. So that's where I came from.
That's very adult.
What's that?
That approach. I know it sounds obvious, but having been through various systems or organizations, so to speak, and you see the pitfalls and the shortcomings of some, you just want to be treated as an adult.
Yeah.
Because you are on a journey, and the idea of make someone religious is ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
It's not respectful to the other person.
Yeah. It's also not a sound and light show by us. It's not look at this,
Right.
It's a real slow process, rigorous. There's a lot of text, a lot of study, a lot of thinking, a lot of talking, and
do most of the boys stay once they Does anyone run a mile after a while and just be like, this is not for me? Or do they stay and they see it out?
Well, there's so much, it's such a rich program that, it's seldom that someone will not be happy in the program. What happens after the program is quite varied. Some people will stay. I mean, there's always a handful of people, which is somewhat unusual, that'll decide they want to stay in Israel forever.
Right.
That's few and far between. I don't think that's a lot. But it happens. And there's some who say, well, I want to stay for a little bit more. And most go back to university and
build a life in America, or
like I myself, when I came, I knew I wanted to return at some point. I just fell in love with the land. That's a separate thing. That wasn't due to study. That was, my wife and I went on our first date. I was like, if this works out, like, I mean, it's only probably going to work out if you want to live in Israel, because that's like, which is like, that's,
it's a big thing to say in the first date.
First date. Yeah.
It definitely came up in my dating when with Rochelle, and I knew I wanted to be here, but because me, it's like, and I said in the previous podcast, it's like, okay, keeping this now, so I've got to go to the land.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, everyone's different.
We suffer from this cognitive dissonance. I'm not I don't even know what the right term is. I'm a lover of Zion,
Right.
But it would probably take more than 2 hours, which is, I mean, it's awesome to speak to you like this. Right. Do we ever get to do this?
Very rarely. Hence one of the reasons why I'm doing it at all.
But it would take a while to explain the nuance of
the land of
how
Israel.
I mean, it's
true.
There are books and books. And what I try to do is, it's a funny thing in my house, on my bookshelf, I have the entire set of Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, who was arguably the thought leader, at least in a certain level of the religious Zionist movement. Mm-hmm. And right on, which, it takes about half a shelf. It's like this many, it's a solid 15, 20 books. And then right next to it is the Satmar Rebbe's entire collection. And they're right next to each other. And the Satmar Rebbe, of course, was like the...
For those that don't know, he was a vehement opposer to the creation of the state of Israel.
So I didn't do it in any disrespectful way. It's more like
that's brilliant.
Symbolic of the synthesis that I'm trying to create. So it would take a while to go through exactly how to resolve that.
Right.
But yeah, I knew I wanted to be here. Practically, and it's in, you can't really go through any Jewish liturgy, whether it's prayer, if you pray 3 times a day, or the blessings after meals. It's just everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. So it was like, well, I don't even want to talk too much about it
because it's too big.
Well, no, because I get that it's also, it's not like, I'm this, look how great I am. I did this. It's more like I'm kind of in awe of the privilege of it too much to make it out to be like I'm a superhero for doing it.
That's beautiful. I understand what you mean.
It's
not an ordinary place. We say it's not an ordinary place for us as Jews, and there's a lot of connection between us and the land, and it deserves a lot of conversation. Yeah,
I have a really dear friend, student. Most of my students eventually become my friends, especially if every year there's like 3, 4, 5 who become lifelong friends. So I have a friend who has an art studio, a photography studio right around the corner.
Beautiful.
Pictures of Israel.
Yeah.
And I told him that after he finishes this first round of photography, I want to go around with him and take pictures of all the places where Judaism is like poking out of the land. You'll see these funny things. Not just, there's the classic things like, when it's about to be a Jewish holiday, it's like on the buses, it'll say, Chag Sameach or things like that. But you walk into a restaurant and there's like some verse from the Bible on the, on the wall.
Or some sage.
Yeah. Or just like a park bench where there's like.
Right, yeah. Subtle, small.
These,
everywhere.
Well, because the land and the people and the Bible and
all connected.
The Torah, so it all happens, in this synergy. they come together, and it just feels like you're
in the right place.
Yeah, a musician. So like, you know, these like big festival concerts where you have like the main stage and there's like the side stage. So without talking about ourselves, like it feels like this is the main stage,
right?
And we're so lucky to be here.
Oh, mate,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So your dad, the book, so that had an impact on your family?
No, actually, certainly not immediately. No, it didn't. It didn't immediately transform my family in any way. Well, again, practically speaking, nothing changed in terms of our day-to-day life. It was just my father was passionate about studying. You know, he was still coaching whatever sports teams we were on, and you know, it's not like he went off and like became a, you know, I don't know,
born again Jew.
Yeah, he didn't. You know, it wasn't like, and I think that speaks to something really healthy about our tradition, is like,
and healthy about your dad,
and super healthy about my dad.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of kept on doing what we were doing.
Did conversations change though?
Nope, totally not.
Wow.
I mean, you know, he occasionally he'd bring up things that he was studying, and but no, I actually had a running for quite some time. I don't know the exact, you know, it all blurs together when you get as you get older. But Shabbos mornings, you know, my father didn't work, and we used to study the Encyclopedia Britannica in the morning. That was what we studied together.
Amazing.
So I always, you know, we would come down and downstairs and pick a volume off the shelf at our leisure, whatever we were interested in, and we would just open up and we would study. And so,
how many brothers and sisters you got?
I have 2 brothers.
No sisters.
No sisters. All rabbis, but not regular rabbis.
That's for sure.
All rabbis. Yeah, it's a funny thing, and there's 3 of us, so when 2 of us do something, like it pulls the third along.
Right.
You know, we're very, very close. So I always joke that as soon as my younger brother, who's, you know, hoping to come to Israel whenever he can, when he comes, the third one's toast.
Right. No chance.
Yeah. It's like, you know, one will get into something and start to share it as brothers do. I mean, growing up. So, I mean, all of us play guitar. All of us are musicians. All of us are rabbis. All of us are bearded. We get confused a lot for each other.
Well, I've met one of them, and it's a double take.
Yeah,
like,
it's a double take.
I thought you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not you.
Yeah. So
okay. So then, without going too much into every detail,
well, it's a funny thing, right? Because hold on a second, let's take a step back. Like my father's an ophthalmologist.
Right.
He's an eye doctor. My mother helped with, you know, maintaining some of the files. My father's like, you know, I mean, his car is like his office. There's like, everything is everywhere.
Wow.
You know, and his major, you know, one of his dictums is like, it's not lost. It's misplaced. It's in here somewhere. You know, like
it's in my car.
It's there somewhere, and it is. You know,
that's hilarious.
He is. It's something else.
Is he a bit of a mad professor, your dad?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but sweet as the, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, I know your dad. Yes.
You know, he's an ophthalmologist, and he's he loves gardening and he loves birds, and he just loves, you know, and I think and this, you know, this encyclopedia thing, and like he just taught us to be curious and open to you know, to really be philosophers in like the actual definitional, you know, like lovers of wisdom.
Right.
Not like
wherever it can be found.
Not deep thinkers, but just like appreciate, like not
stuff. There's a lot out there.
Not smarty pants.
Understand.
Like lovers of wisdom, and to just love people who are experts in things.
Right.
And like, you know, and to learn from everything and everyone. And so so he's an ophthalmologist, and he has 3 rabbi sons, and it was just his love of learning. And my mother loves reading. And like I said, kind of, if my father is the mad professor, which he's not, but he is,
yeah.
My mother is very, you know, organized and kind of reins him in. So they're a great pair like that.
Excellent.
And essentially was at home with us. And so, you know, a lot of love and just healthy curiosity. It was only and passion for study. It was a recipe for
good things,
for
discovery, for the children,
for discovery. Yeah. For and how it ended up being Torah. I mean, Torah's pretty attractive. There's a lot in there. It has a bit of everything.
It is, but curiosity about life and what goes on doesn't equal become a rabbi by any stretch.
For sure not.
But it did to you. So what the question?
I was afforded the opportunity to study it, and I was like,
right.
oh, well, this is compatible with a lot of different things. In other words, like my love of what makes people tick in psychology, which I've maintained and read a lot.
You were interested in people.
People, yeah. Systems, how things work, you know. So I was able to see that that's not inconsistent with, I mean, when I came and studied in Israel and then continued after that for quite a few years, always dual curriculum, you know, always, well, except for that 1 year when I was studying in Israel. No tests, just kind of like a lot of study and thinking and talking with people my age about that experience of kind of like, well, what are we going to do next? Like what? Which is, I mean, to have that, to be afforded that opportunity is crazy. So, you know, we did that, and then having this exposure to the Torah, it's like, you know, I was there, and what I was studying was talking about everything, anything you could imagine. I mean, anything and everything. It's all, there's what, I mean, it's part of this massive tradition that talks about everything from, and some people see it as oppressive, you know, it's like, talks about how to tie your shoes and like how to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And there's like an opinion about it, you know, it's like, wait, what? But for me, I guess because I was living it in a certain sense, it didn't feel like something was coming down strong on me. It was like I was kind of living this system anyway, but not passionately. And it struck me how all-inclusive it was. It's almost like the polar opposite, you know? Like I felt like I could think about, talk about, and reflect on anything through the system because the system talks about it.
Right. It's funny, you say the word oppressive. I understand why. Judaism or keeping the Torah and the mitzvot and the laws, the halachot, to put it simply, will feel oppressive if you think Hashem is oppressive. Like, it's, to me, everything is relative to where it's coming from. I don't think Hashem is oppressive. I never have. I don't plan on it. And so therefore, I think, because I spend a lot of time in my mind thinking, this thing that I think is so unbelievably beautiful, I decided to change my life to keep and to effectively run my life.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have well, I could have done, but if I was a different person, but I didn't, I wouldn't have chosen something oppressive. It's a crazy thing to do.
Sure.
It must have, but the general, a lot of feeling out there is that Judaism is extremely constrictive and oppressive and removes a person's freedom, is chauvinistic, all these different things. But I think people have got a wrong impression of God, of Hashem. Maybe we'll go on. Well, hopefully, if we have time, we'll go on to that in a second. And really everything then comes from that because it all falls under his umbrella. But if you don't think that and you just are, you know, we said in the first line of the Shema, that even the most irreligious people know is the big one, the Shema.
Yeah.
You know, it starts off by saying, you know, you shall love this being, this all-powerful being. So there's love involved. So why would I love someone if they were oppressive? I wouldn't love a human being if they were oppressing me.
For sure. I mean, there are people who are stuck in those types of relationships, and
I understand, but that's a dysfunctional.
Well, right. Well, there's also people who practice the behaviors of whatever religion they're practicing and are stuck in this. Meaning, it's not like
true,
right? So it's not like there's this sense of being. I'd say there's 4 categories. There's like, I'm in it and I feel oppressed. I'm in it and I'm loving it.
Right.
I'm not in it and I feel oppressed. And I'm meaning, right? Because it's like, or I'm not in it and I'm loving not being in it. So, you know, they're all on the table.
They're all on the table.
And I think that's part of what makes it so special to choose it. And especially if you find the love for it.
Right. It's challenging. It always has been challenging. I mean, hello, from having a life where there were no rules apart from the laws of England to saying, you know, invisible God makes up the rules now.
Yeah.
But of course, but it isn't that. And that's why I'm fascinated by people that I like to know why people don't want to get involved. I understand why people are involved. I'm around a lot of that nowadays. Obviously, that's my life now more than ever. But I'm fascinated why people don't want to get involved. That to me is an interesting conversation. And like I heard from Rabbi David Aaron just last Sunday, he gave this amazing Zoom class, and I've touched base with him since. You know, and he was saying like what you know, the impression that you have of this creator is basically going to determine everything.
Right.
If you're in it, you're not going to enjoy it. If you're in it and you enjoy it, like you said, you're going to really love it.
Yeah.
And I feel blessed that I love it.
Well, let me ask you a question about you said I know you're a proper, you know, Englishman. You know, you have warm feelings for England. And that's
parts of it. Yeah.
Well, you said before you were bound to the laws, you know, of England. There were certain things that you could and couldn't do.
Yeah.
Stands to reason that you grew up in that, you know, on a certain level. So it's always going to be different. You know, if you grow up in something and you're used to it, it doesn't. And that could be a problem too, because people could not choose it, right? It could be like and that's one of the categories that we spoke about. Like you didn't really choose it. It's kind of oppressive, but you just grew up like this. You didn't really think about it.
Right.
But, you know, I don't know how you feel about it, but what do you feel about England and the laws there and the culture there? And
generally.
Yeah. How do you feel about it? I mean, living in a country is oppressive also. Like there are rules and I'm just going to like jump in here but you know, there's also a culture, you know, and there's so many other pieces to it. It's not like England is about rules. I mean, there are rules
that keep the society together.
That keep it together, but
it's not the totality of the place.
Well, there's the culture. There's the family vibe of having a landsman, you know? And there's all these things so it depends where you're kind of swimming.
I guess you're right. And also, if you're not taking, if you take it for granted, and you're not really thinking about it, and you're lucky enough to be born into a number one decent family, who work hard. That was a big deal for me. I've said it before. Strong, powerful work ethic throughout my entire family. From every member of my family I can think of, it's just all been strong work ethic. We get on with it. We work hard. We do what we can do, and we spend money. Don't go mad. Don't be over the top, flash, like throwing it around. Just be a decent human being with it. So I guess if you put all those, went to good schools, good at sports, you know, just a lot of blessing there. And so like, yeah, I was all right with. I took it for granted that there were rules. But that's not why I chose Judaism. I chose Judaism because after all of that being said, with all the positive things that were in my life, I lacked meaning with all of it. Because one thing England doesn't provide you, there's no meaning.
Sure.
There's no meaning if you are seeking deeper meaning, you know, to be participating in all these activities and to be going to this nightclub, that nightclub, meeting this, but you're just on an autopilot of whatever is being provided you and what your peers are doing. Okay, so this time we're going to go to holiday here. So it's all like, it's really the world choosing you, not you choosing the world.
Yeah.
And I just found myself confused. Really confused. A completely different background to yours. You know, my dad wasn't that. My dad's not that at all. He's a working class, middle class, but working class man. Lovely guy, my dad. And parents were, my family were the same. No books, no studying. TV and football, cricket and all the stuff that a good English boy would be.
Sure.
But I was inside a bothered human being. And I needed answers badly. And that's what led me to, certain things. And then, Rabbi Yeshua Gerzi, who I hope, number one, hopefully he's going to be coming in soon for the review of life so far since he met me.
Sure. We have a mic for him right there.
We have a three-way, definitely. But I guess I was just looking for meaning. And that's why I'm always fascinated by people like yourself, where I think you had meaning, but I think you were trying to deepen the meaning, or maybe not. I don't know. Or just discovering along the way.
When you put it like that, I feel like I met Hashem before I knew about the laws. I was living the laws on a certain level, right? Like if I would speak to my 5-year-old or my 8-year-old and ask them to kind of like talk about, well, what are the laws that we follow in our family? I'm not sure that, right? But if I would say something to them about their relationship with Hashem, which is a totally different thing than God, as you were kind of like, so yeah, they know who Hashem is,
right?
They not in an odd way, they talk to Hashem, I've caught my 5-year-old on a number of occasions, like he's like, can't find his shoes. He's like, Hashem, please help me find my shoes.
Excellent.
Yeah. And
he said something along those lines when he was at a house last week playing with my son. Something similar, I can't remember exactly, but out of his mouth came some deep reflection connected with Hashem and his relationship with Hashem.
Yeah.
Even if you could say, oh yeah, but it's just a 5-year-old playing out what he sees Abba and Ima do,
and it is.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's also something that's
it's a relationship though.
It's a relationship.
It's still a relationship.
Yeah.
And the laws, and I don't know where we fall out on the line of parenting in terms of letting our kids kind of do whatever they want to do and giving them direction. We're probably different, my wife and I also, in that, like probably in most families.
Yeah.
We guide them, we try to direct them. So they're aware that there are things that are, expected of them, which is a funny thing, right? Because like they didn't choose it.
Right.
But relationship, they're choosing, because you can't force someone to have a relationship.
Right.
And it seems to be healthy. And so kind of speaking back to what you were saying before, if you have a healthy and happy relationship with Hashem, then the mitzvos become eitzos. They become advice. They become, well, here are...
trusted advice as well.
Yeah, here are kind of like bullet points along your day where you can kind of like come back to that relationship.
Yeah. He's always around to you. I feel like he's always got his arm around my shoulder.
You're very lucky.
But again, I can't see it in any other way. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. And that's why, yes, for sure, I'm fascinated by why people choose to be an atheist and they ridicule religion. And it's all over YouTube. And it's one of the main motivating reasons why I've started this podcast. And I'm fascinated by it and all that stuff. But still at the same time, even if I go into a whole big 3-4 hour conversation about, atheism versus God, does God exist? Myself, I'm just going to be like, okay, after all is said and done, this is how I feel. I feel like Hashem is holding me all the time, holding the whole world. He's a father to everyone. And it's not a religion, what we do. And that doesn't apply just to Jews. That applies to every human being. And he's involved. And we could choose to take his advice, and he created it all. And so therefore he knows best. And so therefore you're not doing anything strange by following his advice, even though some of it sounds and seems a bit archaic. and very, especially to a secular boy, like, you know, wearing a garment with 4 corners to put strings on it. On the face of it, that's ridiculous. Everything's ridiculous in religion.
Well, so is sitting on the floor and playing Magna-Tiles with my 5-year-old. It's ridiculous, but that's how I have a relationship with him, because I'm not gonna sit and speak about theoretical physics with him. So we have these mitzvos. The mitzvos are they're toys that help us to, right? Meaning,
right.
So, but if you feel like that, and again, that's obviously one angle of it,
Mm-hmm.
but if you see them as, is there a level of arbitrariness to them? That's a matter of philosophical debate, but you could argue that it's certainly the meaning behind it is secondary to the relationship. In other words, that there is a means of connection that came top down, right? At least in our conception of Hashem delivering the Torah and saying, "You guys want to play? Like, here's
my toys."
Here's the. So if that's your conception, and at that point in Jewish history, because Jewish history started before that,
of course, there
was already a relationship. We had a relationship. The laws were like, here's a bunch of ways we could continue to further this I actually just shared this with we had like getting to know you, because the guys, these 18, 19-year-olds, I just gave birth to like 50 children, you know.
When yesterday?
Well, yesterday they came off the plane. They're now 2 weeks in isolation because of Corona.
Right. Oh, so it's all starting on Zoom at the yeshiva?
Yeah. Well, we met them in person with like quite a bit of distance between us. They went straight into the hotel.
Right.
So we've been kind of just getting to know each other over Zoom, which is crazy. And one of the things I shared with them is when I was probably 8 years old, if I had to guess, somewhere around there, I had a neighbor, like I lived, let's say, over here in my house, and my neighbor had their house and their room, the window was kind of like facing over in this direction. And our neighbors, our windows faced each other, and we had like a rope that went from one room to the other.
Cool.
And there was a basket that we could kind of like send things back. I mean, no phones, no computers.
That's so cool.
We used to, I mean, I doubt, in my memory, it's probably a more significant and longer period than it actually was. You know, my parents were probably like, "What are you doing?" You know, like we probably had to take it down rather quickly. But that metaphor sits in my mind super strong as like, I had this neighbor, there was like distance between us, and we had this rope that was connecting us. And mitzvos, the word mitzvah, commandment, again, coming from the mystical tradition, the word mitzvah, but it's really just there in the word, comes from the language of rope, tzavta. So each of these are kind of like, if you prefer, instead of the toy metaphor of being like given all these means of playing on a gap that's, I mean, the distance between me and my 5-year-old is like, compared to the creator of the universe, you know, it's quite a bit of a difference. Mm-hmm. But another way of thinking that is like, there's all these ropes, and all we have, you know, we squeeze the rope on the bottom, wave it around a little bit, and it kind of shimmies up the rope, and
right,
and that creates a relationship. You know, not in a childish way, but if you're engaged in that from time to time throughout the day, then you're constantly thinking about talking to.
You're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
With that, not a person, but you're comfortable with that creator. It's hard to call him anything, but you're comfortable.
Yeah. What's also interesting is that a lot of the commandments are woven into our history.
Right.
So, which is, in other words, like a house, like a home. You know, like the things that we have in our home, the ways that I interact with my children, and as they get older, when you walk into my house, there's like a few pieces of broken pottery from a little excursion that I went with my daughter. She's 8. We went a few weeks ago. We were happy to be back in Israel after 2 years in America, and we went for a little walk in the valley over there. We found some old shards of pottery. Don't know when they're from. I don't know if we're supposed to report them to the antiquities, but whatever, we brought it home. And now when we walk in the house, those little shards of pottery are a reminder of, of that experience. So what if, and this is really what mitzvos are in a certain way, what if, yes, as a mandate, yes, as an obligation, but really as an eitzah, what if I said to my daughter, what would be a good idea? And imagine if I was going away for a while, you couldn't really reach out and touch me, right? So let's say I was traveling for a week. I say, well, if you feel like you miss me, or you feel like you want to remember that, just go up and pick up one of those pieces of pottery and put it down. So on the one hand, that's really stupid. It doesn't do anything. On the other hand, she's now relating to me because she's remembering that experience.
It's a trigger.
It's a trigger. And on a certain level, the mitzvos are these different triggers. They're these different ropes that are connecting our room to, I don't know what's going on the other side in terms of the room.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. It's okay to say, I don't fully know or understand. In general, that's a good idea. I would never say to another person, like, I totally get you, David. Like, I know you inside and like, I don't. You can't know another person. It would be absurd to assume, and insulting to assume, that we could fathom and understand the Creator.
And he doesn't want that, it would appear. He doesn't want us to know him because firstly, for me, it's unknowable. The relationships. I'm married to my wife, thank God, for 13 years. Like you just said, do I know her? I know stuff that she does, right. And she loves me, and I love her, and we have a family, thank God, and all this stuff. How can I know her?
Right.
But the relationship, I know the relationship,
sure,
or I know the experience,
sure,
and
the hard parts of it too.
The hard part, the challenging parts, and so therefore, yes, that I just copy paste that. Our human experience is identical to our Hashem experience.
For sure,
it's identical.
For sure,
and that's why it's, again, like people say, no, there's God over there, and then there's our reality, but not if you see it as the things that go on here are like a replica. I think it might be a good word, a motif, of what our relationship with him is all about. Okay, there's nuances, obviously, goes without saying, but at the heart of it, he's saying, I want a relationship with you.
Sure.
Do you want one with me?
The quintessential, I believe one of the sages referred to one of the books of Tanakh, of the Bible, as the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. The holiest book of Tanakh, not on the level of, we don't get into the legalistic aspect of Bible versus, prophets versus the writings, but Kodesh HaKadoshim, the holiest of the holiest, is Shir HaShirim, which is a story about love between a man and a woman, between two people.
Called the Song of Songs, right?
Song of Songs. And it's a love story that is a metaphor for the relationship between creation and creator. All creation, like even this cup, and God. There's a pining, as hard to understand as that is, but it's expressing this desire to be. It's created. Everything that's created desires to return to its source on a certain level, and so all of creation, certainly human beings, are conscious of it because we are conscious. Are in this relationship with the Creator, but there's no mention of Creator or creation in the entire book. It's just these two people who are madly in love with each other, chasing each other around, and that's what it is. So the human relationship, that's the to be a person who's not in a relationship with the Creator, is similar to be in a person who's not in a relationship with another person, except that I would say that with the additional point that being in a relationship with another person or with other people, being your friend is a model of, in that same way that I don't know you, but I respect you and I love you and and all these different adjectives that I could use to describe our relationship.
We want to experience each other.
And we have laws between each other.
Of course.
But those are secondary to the relationship. Going back to that point that I met God before, and before signing on to the actual lifestyle,
right?
Which is maybe why it doesn't feel. It feels like an expression of the relationship. There's a covenant,
Is there something also in the famous phrase of Na'aseh v'nishma, which we said at Mount Sinai when Hashem said, "Hey, want to be involved with me?" And we basically responded Na'aseh v'nishma, which means we'll do it, and then we'll hear about it, we'll listen to it, we'll work it out, we'll study it.
Yeah, Na'aseh is like, let's do this.
Let's do this.
Let's be in a relationship. Nishma is, what does that mean? What does that entail? And in order to get to a place where you have an entire nation that's willing to say, we're in for this relationship, I mean, there's a pretty remarkable backstory to that. I am, in some ways, in terms of my affinity for psychology, a student of Carl Jung. He was a bit of a mystic also, a bit of a madman for sure. And that any psychologist who's listening to this now is like, oh, this guy he's not really into psychology because, he gets a bad rep. Incidentally, Dr. Jung said that in an interview towards the end of his life, he said that all of his major breakthroughs and innovations in the world of psychology were already discovered by a rabbi named Rabbi Dovid'l of Mezrich, who was the second generation student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidut. So maybe that's also where my affinity comes from. I didn't find that out till later. Anyway, one of Jung's major positions is that your psyche is not something that starts from the day you're born. You carry this weight. It goes back to that conversation we were having about missing the Holocaust, because there's a biological kind of Mesora, English. Tradition is a biological kind of inheritance that you receive from your parents, but there's also a psychology, and it's totally not biological at all. I mean, that's part of when you join Judaism, whether you feel like you were saying, you feel like an outsider coming in, or you're literally a convert. You're not born Jewish, and there is the possibility, and that's part of the ritual of converting, which is not something we go and try to actively missionize or do. Mm-hmm. But when somebody does decide to join, we're like, you're taking on all of the psychological, archetypical kind of like
backdrop
of this whole relationship. Right. And so that's...
Are you sure you want that?
Right. And so, that's what when we said Na'aseh v'nishma, in order to get to that place, we had just come out of being enslaved. But before that, even way before that, there's a whole Jewish history of building relationships there were no mitzvot yet. There was no commandments.
No rules,
no rules,
nothing.
No book. All bottom-up relationship. And that could only take us kind of so far, right? Because to go back to that, how creative could my 2-year-old or 5-year-old be in trying to build a relationship with me? It's much easier if I come down and say,
right.
But
you mean to work within a structure? It's just, again, it's extremely helpful.
Yeah.
And we can't all do what Abraham did.
Sure. Can I blow your mind for a second?
Please.
Okay.
Although that's the goal.
What's that?
To be like Abraham, to be where the rules take you so far. It's like music.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. Know the rules.
Throw it all out.
Yeah.
It's like anything. In sports, you don't think about when you're striking a ball in baseball or cricket, or you're kicking a ball in football like these Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, in that moment of striking the ball perfectly, he's not thinking about how do I strike a football. It's just in him.
Flow.
It's flow. And isn't that the whole point? You know, when you're in a relationship, you're talking to your wife, be like, let's talk about our relationship.
Right.
How tedious and boring is that?
Right.
I cut you off, sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to go with your thread here for a second. The difference, though, which is profound and powerful for me, or at least what we're claiming, is that if the footballer is making these perfect strikes, like beautiful, gorgeous, you know? I mean, who could not? You have to...
Yeah. Timing,
precision, everything.
Everything connects in harmony.
And the hours of practice to be able to go beyond what a normal person thinks is within the realm of how this machine that we have here works, and to really fine tune it to get to that point where it's like, you know, so many thousands of hours that it almost looks like magic when the person's doing it, because the most people haven't fine tuned themselves like that.
Right. And feels like magic if you've ever been lucky enough to be there.
Right. So here's the funny part. And I suppose this will probably blow our minds also. So there's all these rules, right? There's rules that are written into the game, and there's these rules of like what you need to do to get to that level of perfection and precision. And I suppose that's what you were trying to get to, that if you're in these rules that create this amazing texture of what it means to live as a Jewish person when you forget about the rules, but you're like swimming in it.
Yeah.
The difference between the two is that if the soccer player for just a moment would stop and say, well, why am I doing this? Like, it's phenomenal. It feels great. It is great. It's something that deserves to be respected. Because there's a person overcame the natural limitations of what it means to be a human being. But then when you take a step back and you're like, what am I doing? It's like, there's no real meaning, but it's remarkable. But that's why you finish the game and you have a moment of quiet, and it's like you have this cup sitting on your, on your mantle, and you're like, yeah, but what now? Like, if you do the same thing when you're swimming in what we're swimming in, what I am so blessed to feel like I'm swimming in, you take a step back and like, well, why? And it's like, well, I don't think it's as insignificant to say I'm in a relationship with the creator of the world. That's not like but like what now? It's like, that's pretty cool.
It is.
Being in a relationship with a person, which I think is like we were talking before, you could stop and it's like, well, why? And it's like, well, that's pretty close to, and I think a lot of people, especially, and that's great. That's a good thing. Healthy people who don't have a relationship with God find meaning probably more than anywhere else in their life with other people. And that's good. I mean, because at the end of the day, you could say, well, what's this about? Why am I investing all these rules and all of this effort and time into hopefully making something worthwhile in a relationship? And you might answer by saying, well, because there's something meaningful about connecting to another person. And I think that that's real. I think that that's significant.
And it's going beyond what we can touch. It's going beyond the senses.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I can only speak for myself because I've only lived in me. There is a reality to my life beyond my physical self. I can't show you. I assume that you feel that because you look like a human being like me. So I'm assuming there's a similarity between you and me. I can't know for sure, but I'm pretty much banking on it. So I can only really talk about me. And I feel a sense of there is something else to my reality. I was listening to a podcast this morning on the way to work here. And it was Joe Rogan speaking with Richard Dawkins. It was recorded a while ago. And what were they talking about? They were talking about the brain. They were talking about like Richard Dawkins being an atheist, who, by the way, I've got a lot of respect for his thoughts, his views. Obviously, some of it I don't agree with, but in terms of a lot of it, I like listening to him.
Well, what would we do without the atheists?
Oh, just what would we do?
We wouldn't hone or be able to figure out what it is that, I mean, their questions.
They're amazing.
Are good questions.
Oh, they're amazing, and we disagree about the final conclusion.
Sure.
But in terms of getting there, amazing.
Well, because you become complacent otherwise which is why I love what I do as a teacher.
Absolutely.
Because it's like,
you get sharpened.
Never thought about that before, but now let me think about it, and fit it into a system and be brave and honest about it.
They were saying on that point, his point was like, Dawkins is like, so when you die and the brain dies, that's it.
Yeah.
Because we are our brains. Basically, everything is our brain. So when the brain's dead, we're worm food and that's it. So I'm going to say, in relation to what I said before about how I feel there's something else going on, and always felt that sense. It's a sense. I can't show you, but I sense it. Always did as a kid, and more so even now. But when the Torah comes along and explains about the soul and the neshama, correct me if I'm wrong, but it hovers around the brain and it's connected to one's thoughts and thinking and stuff like that. That makes perfect sense to me. It means that when we die, it's not over. Because yes, it's true, the brain is the physical and the chemical manifestation, if you like, of the life force. It's we're a computer. We're going here, we're going there, we're driving a car, we're like, throwing balls, we're setting up microphones. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you can't touch the thoughts. Sure. It doesn't work. None of that works. So there is another dimension. And so again, it's to me, it's all part of this narrative that hints to me strongly, otherwise it wouldn't have become what I've become. Mm-hmm. That not only is there something else out there, but when I've looked into it more, obviously I arrived at the answer is Judaism and the Torah, mm-hmm. which we don't have to go into massively now. It's again probably another 50-year podcast. Sure. But bottom line and simply put, there's something else going on, and Torah for me allows access to that. And then when you bring in the history, and you bring in looking at it as a relationship between you and a parent, and all these other things like, how could I have been here if it wasn't for something else out there beyond the physical, and mm-hmm. And you put it all together and you're like, wow, how can I not be excited about being in this relationship with this God that I cannot see, right. But I feel. Very hard to communicate that to people who don't feel it. I see people they don't get upset with me. Yeah. But there's a tension. You can't
communicate it.
Yeah, there's a tension. I feel bad for people.
King David said, David Melech said, Ani ki ani yadati, because I know that that Hashem is Gadol, He is great, and the way that some traditions understand that is that what he was trying to say is like, I know it, but I can't really explain it. Right. I can't explain this to you. Right. And I think one of the first places I saw that was in the thinking of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and what he writes after that is quite another level of astounding. He says that sometimes from one day to the next, you can't really even explain it to yourself. It's not just that I'm having trouble explaining it to somebody else, but you've had experiences where
can't explain it to yourself.
Well, I'm not even talking about like mystical experiences. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about experiences where you're like, this is not just a chemical experience. Right.